so that we can arrange for it to be posted onto our YouTube channel afterwards. So if anybody misses tonight, or anybody enjoys it so much they'd like to go back and view it a second time, it's available there for you to go back and view again. Equally, the presentations we'll be receiving from Karen and Caroline, we will post those on our website. So again, all the information in there will be available for you to download and to view again at a later date. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If I could ask people to keep their mics off while our speakers are speaking, and if you've got any questions that occur to you as the presentations go along, if you can just post those in the chat, we'll try and make sure we deal with them at the end. And then hopefully we'll have, once we get to that end point and have dealt with those questions, we'll have a bit of time where we can have a more general Q&A session if people have got anything they'd like to discuss, or a more general discussion. Anyway, as I said, this evening, the title of our webinar this evening is Beat Those Bills. And this is about looking at help that's available to the vulnerable, to help with heating and energy bills, and to reduce the costs of energy in the first place, and some of the support that's available and things that people can do if they do find themselves with difficulties paying their energy bills, or in their relationship with the energy companies. Our speakers tonight are Karen Strandu from Norfolk Warm Homes, and Caroline Mackinson from the Citizens Advice Service, based down in the south of the county, down in distant Thetford. Now, I'm sure you'd much rather listen to them than listen to me, so I'll hand you over now to our first speaker. That's Karen Strandu. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Peter. I'm just going to try and share my screen. Have you handed over to me, Peter, for sharing?
I have. You're sharing. It should come up. You'd click the share screen button.
Yep. We just did this, guys, so we actually had a rehearsal for it. There we go. It's a bit slow. I'm based in Diss, and I think my network here is running a little bit slowly.
Yeah, I used to live down that way, and it was quite slow at times.
There we go. Yeah. So as Peter said, my name's Karen Strandu. I'm the Warm Homes Programme Manager. When I'm not working from home, I'm based in the District Council offices in Broadland, who is the lead authority for the programme. And it's very timely that we're meeting tonight, given that we've had an announcement from the Chancellor about lunchtime today. And I'll come on to that a bit later about what we think is coming down the pipeline very, very shortly. And so moving on, who is the Warm Homes? I'll just, who are we? Well, we are a partnership of all the Norfolk councils and some of our local social housing providers as well. And we were established, we got together to provide energy efficiency measures and support to fuel poor Norfolk households. And this came around because there were opportunities for to apply for funding as a consortium or partnerships back in 2018. So we've been running for about over 2 years now, and we're quite a well-established partnership. Initially, we were funded by the National Grid, which was private sector funding, and that funding enabled us to provide first-time central heating grants. And we're just coming to the end of that programme. I'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. And more recently, we've had success in applying for government grants. And the grant that we currently have from the government runs up till March 2023. And today we just heard that they're extending these grant programmes to run to 2025. So we've got 25, 26. So the government is planning a long-term approach to funding energy efficiency programmes, which is good news for us. And as I mentioned earlier, Broadland District Council is the lead partner. We have a team based at Broadland that works across the whole of Norfolk as really like a hub, if you like. We work very closely with our district council partners, and also we work very closely with a lot of referral partners that refer into us when they are meeting with their residents and clients, and we refer also out to those referral networks where they're best placed to help people that we can't. So it's quite a well-developed referral network now. So the problem, I have to say, these statistics are kind of out of date now, as we're just hearing. We've got, these were about 2018 figures. We had about 40,000 households living in fuel poverty in Norfolk. The National Energy Action Organization has just predicted that that will rise by 50% in the coming year because of all the squeeze on cost of living, and also, as we well know, the massive rise in energy prices. In Norfolk, we've got 45 families with children, and over 30% of our residents are renting, and we've got 50% working families. So the households that are in fuel poverty cross a number of different sectors: families, working families, renters, homeowners. And of course, we're seeing this as a much bigger problem now than we had even 18 months ago, with a massive rise in energy costs. And we've just heard an announcement from the Bank of England this week that we're expecting another about 42% rise in energy costs. And that will bring the average household energy price up to about £3,000. And of course, in England, not just in Norfolk, but across the country, we've got really, really bad insulated housing. And it's very, very old housing stock that we have in the UK. So we've got problems from both sides, really. So there's a lot of work to be done to make our homes warmer and really to manage our energy bills going forward. So that's a bit about the problem. A little bit about what we've been doing to date. Since 2018, we've been able to fund over 580 households with first-time central heating. And these were grants to provide heating to households that had no central heating at all. So they may have had coal fires, electric bar fires. We've had people even using paraffin heaters to heat their homes, which clearly has led or can lead to a lot of health issues, respiratory problems, cardiovascular problems, and just not really efficient heating at all. And since then, with the other additional grants that have come in from the government, we've also helped over 200 properties with cavity wall insulation, external and internal, and also heating upgrades. And those heating upgrades have been high retention storage heaters, if they've had very old storage heaters that are not very, well, they haven't been programmable, but also with air source heat pumps, so more of the renewable type of heating. The grant funding is available to owner-occupiers and private tenants. We do ask our private tenants to have the landlords contact us directly. There is a contribution that we require from landlords, a third of the cost, up to a third of the cost. So it's still very attractive to landlords to really make improvements to their properties, and also it's much better for their tenants, obviously. And also we have a support or wraparound program whereby for those more vulnerable residents, we can actually go out and offer one-to-one support. We can do home visits as well. And we've secured over nearly £2 million in financial benefits and savings to about 600 residents. And those financial benefits are really hard, tangible savings and benefits, either doing benefits checks for residents, claiming where, getting involved with their energy companies where they've overpaid their energy companies, where they've been in dispute with their companies, but also just accessing charitable funds, in a lot of cases. And so those total benefits have been really significant over the last nearly over 2 years. So going forward, as I mentioned, we have more grants coming in from the government, and the current government funding provides energy efficiency. It's a slightly different approach from the first time central heating, but it is designed to support still low income households. And it's also to increase the energy efficiency rating to at least an EPC, Energy Performance Certificate rating of a C. So we are really looking for those really poor insulated homes to put in energy efficiency measures to really increase that rating. And that is a requirement from the government funding now. And we didn't really have that with the first time central heating grants. It was more to make the properties more efficient to run for low income families, but we've got that additional measure that we need to meet with our government grants. The other slightly different approach with the government funding is it's a whole house approach. So we have to start with what they call the fabric first. So before we can install any renewable heating or any upgrades, we need to make sure that that house is warm and well insulated. So we're looking at roof insulation, loft insulation, cavity wall insulation, external wall insulation before the central heat, the renewable heating goes in. And this makes perfect sense because you do not want to put an air source heat pump, for example, into a really leaky house, because you will spend a fortune trying to keep that house warm with an air source heat pump, because it will just run out through the windows and the walls. And the other requirement from the government is that all installers now need to be certified, Trustmark certified, and what's called PAS 2035. It's a publicly available standard. So these are really high standards now that all installers must meet in order that we can give those grants to the homeowners. And at Broadland, with the Warm Homes Partnership, we have a number of installers that we're working with now that are Trustmarked and are PAS certified. That rather does limit our market. There's a lot of people or installers out there that are not certified. The government's really hoping that the installers will go out and get these certifications so that we bring in more installers into the market. So it really is upskilling the supply chain. So what do we have to offer? I've touched on this a bit. We can provide measures, loft and cavity wall insulation, external wall as well. We are working with government to see if we can also start installing internal wall insulation where we can't get external wall installed. And for properties that are off the mains gas, we can help by installing renewable air source heat pumps. And as I mentioned before, we do the fabric first, and then we do the air source heat pumps. And to make the home really warm, if we're putting in an air source heat pump and we have leaky windows, we will be able to insulate windows and doors as well. And because it's a fabric first, we have up to £25,000 that we can put into a house to keep it insulated and warm. It will depend on the rating, the EPC rating, the starting rating of that house as to how much we can put in. And there's a whole sliding scale, but we'll work with the homeowners to see what's required and what we can actually install in that house. So in terms of eligibility, what the program's open to homeowners and tenants, as I mentioned earlier, with a household income, and this is a total household income of less than £30,000 a year. And that's really how the government's wrapping up low income or fuel poverty, and that's the assessment that we'll do. As I mentioned, we have to have a property that has an EPC rating of EF or G, really poor, and we have to bring it up to an EPC rating of C, because that's what the government's trying to achieve throughout the whole of the housing stock in the UK. We still have advice and support as a wraparound programme for all residents. It doesn't matter if they're in low income, if they're calling us, they need advice about saving energy, reducing their energy bills, we're there to help them too. And the wraparound support that we provide, as I said, we do home visits, but we'll do benefits checks for residents, making sure residents are on the benefits they're claiming, what they need to. We do quite a lot of attendance allowance applications for the elderly people over 65s that have got poor mobility, poor health, and this will give them that extra bit of money that will help them certainly pay their energy bills, and but also any other support services that they may need. We signpost to other grant schemes and support. You'll hear from Caroline after me, and we signpost a lot of people to Citizens Advice for further support. Caroline's been organising a programme where to provide top-ups for key cards for energy, for energy prepayment meters, which has been a really good support programme that we've been able to refer people to. And in terms of the applications for their home upgrades or their insulation, we can actually help them with those applications and get the evidence that we need to demonstrate that they are on earning less than £30,000. I'd like to mention too that we have got other schemes that we are offering people that are not necessarily in fuel poverty, but would like to reduce their carbon footprints and also reduce their energy bills. We, all the Norfolk councils are involved in an energy switch programme. Well, we have been. Actually, at this point, we are not advising customers of companies to switch. The energy market now is unable to secure a competitive price. We had auctions periodically, it's bulk buying, but we're not advising anybody at this point to switch. That may change in the future. We're still involved in that iChooser program. iChooser is the organisation that organises the big energy switch, and more information can be found on their website. We are keeping an eye on this to see if the situation changes. I actually don't see it changing anytime soon, but perhaps we'll be in a different position towards the end of the year or next year. We also offer a solar together scheme. Again, this is a group buying scheme for installing solar panels, and this is for all residents, not just people that are in fuel poverty, obviously. And last year we helped over 218 residents with their offers for solar installations, and it can result in quite a large savings to having group buying schemes. We've actually had an average saving of over 40% compared with the typical market for solar panels. And we're continuing to run that scheme going through this year and hopefully into the future. Again, that is a bulk buying scheme that's managed by iChooser. I don't think with our audience need to talk about the benefits of this, but clearly upgrading properties is a good thing. It makes houses more saleable. It increases the value of properties. This is certainly important, I think, for landlords when we're trying to approach landlords to say, if we can put in energy efficiency measures, it makes the property more valuable. It also helps landlords meet the regulatory requirements. All landlords now need to, under the minimum energy efficiency standards, they cannot rent properties that are an E or F rated properties. They have to get to an E if they cannot rate F and G properties. So putting in measures will help landlords meet the regulatory requirements. And obviously we're trying to reduce the energy and carbon emissions, and not forgetting that it really does increase comfort and well-being for people that are living in cold homes, otherwise that would be living in cold homes. How to apply? Well, you can call us. There's our telephone number there. You'll call into Broadland, and any number of our team there can help with inquiries. We also have a web form on our website, which is norfolkwarmhomes.org, and easy form to fill out. As I mentioned, homeowners and tenants can apply. Tenants will need landlord approval, but we can work directly with landlords. we will need proof of income to assess eligibility. And that's why we can help with that if some of our more vulnerable residents are having difficulty accessing any of their proof of income, we can help with that. And we do need to assess the suitability of the property. And we will go out where it needs. We have access to people that can go out, review the property and say, yes, this property could benefit from an air source heat pump or external wall insulation, because it's really important to get the right measures into the right home. And we also have budget and financing for undertaking a pre and a post EPC, which is required by the government. Many properties already have an EPC. If a house has been bought or sold probably within the last 5-6 years, an EPC will already exist on a property. They're all lodged on a government's website, so it's easy to find out if the EPC exists for a property. If it doesn't, we can do one. After the measures have gone in, then we do a post EPC. And this is to demonstrate that we've actually moved that EPC up through the ratings to make the property warmer. Further assistance, I'm not going to dwell too much on this because I think Caroline's going to pick it up in her talk, but the energy companies can help with bill paying and debt support. We will intervene on behalf of residents if we have their approval to do so with energy companies. It is, to be honest, quite difficult to get money from the energy companies, although they do have trust accounts. Some energy companies also provide what's called eco-funding, energy company obligation funding, for replacing broken boilers. And we have a list of those companies that do provide that funding. Again, we can provide that advice to residents. I'll just throw out there, Anglia Water also has a support program to help vulnerable customers with their bills. Other assistance for people that are really, really desperately struggling with paying their bills. Not just energy. We find a lot of people are calling us because there's pressure on their energy bills, there's pressure on their food shopping, and there's pressure on buying other household goods and just day-to-day living. The Norfolk Assistance Scheme can help with some of that. And that's a good place to go. It's managed by Norfolk County Council. If you could Google Norfolk Assistance Scheme, all the information's on there. Help hubs are actually operated by the councils, and each council has its own unique way of establishing their help hub. Broadland and South Norfolk have one number that you can go into. Kings Lynn actually have an organisation called Lily that manage their help hub. But there are hardship funds that the councils can provide through those help hubs to help people that are really quite desperate. The Community Action Norfolk runs an oil buying scheme, and you can register with that to help bring down the cost of buying oil. And really, this is quite new. I think in April, the government announced the boiler upgrade scheme. This is not just for people that are struggling to pay bills or even low income. This is for anybody. The government is offering £5,000 towards air source heat pumps, which can help. We're actually finding that the average cost of an air source heat pump is more like £9,000 to £10,000 right now. So the 5 will help, but you've still got to have that cash to contribute to that. And as I mentioned earlier, it's no good putting in an air source heat pump into a leaky house. So all the other insulation measures need to be either in place or to be put in at the same time. Hot off the press, this is what was announced today. And I hope this is really, really, I'm sure this will help people that are really struggling. At least it's really welcome. And so Rishi Sunak announced today that there'll be one-off payments for different amounts to the most vulnerable, focusing primarily on elderly and people with disability and the lowest incomes. All households will receive a £400 discount on energy bills. Not a lot of detail on this, but my understanding right now is this is a discount and that won't be as a loan that has to be repaid over the next few years, which is welcomed. We've got 8 million people of the lowest incomes will also get a one-off payment of £650. And there'll be a one-off disability cost of living payment of £150, and pensioners will get £300. No detail yet how this will be administered or how it will go out. It possibly will be administered through local councils. I'm only assuming this. It would be really interesting to see, possibly similarly in the way that the £150 has been given through the council tax rebate. But we'll wait and see. More information to come on that. And just finally, here's our details, which will be circulated afterwards, but please feel free to contact us. And I will say we're also developing new flyers that we can distribute to yourselves if you contact us and let us know what your needs are. We've got information sheets on energy saving, what air source heat pumps are all about, how to save energy in the home more generally. And then we've also got leaflets and flyers that are coming out about the grant schemes itself. So if you need any of these informations, let me know. And we've also got pop-up banners that I'm having printed. So do contact me directly if you think it will be helpful for either yourselves or any of the residents that you're dealing with or in contact with. Thank you.
Right, lovely, Karen. Thank you very much for that. There's lots of useful information there, and I'm sure everybody will want to make a note of your contact to find out more, particularly as more gets announced by the Treasury and by the government, and some of the detail of these schemes is fleshed out. And talking about schemes that can help, we now move over to Caroline Mackinson from Diss and Thetford District Citizens Advice Bureau, who's going to talk a little bit more about some of the support that's available through them. So Caroline, it's over to you now. You like?
Yeah, I'm just trying to share. It's
You're
great how it
struggling
works.
with the same link that Karen was struggling with earlier.
Multiple participants. Okay, oops, I'm on the. Here we go. Yeah, sorry, I'm clicked the wrong bit. Okay. Can everybody see that? Yeah, does that come through? Excellent. So yes, I'm Caroline Mackinson. Thank you, Karen, for talking about the scheme in Norfolk. And I think what's really valuable about what the councils are doing is very much supporting people, which is often very difficult to, you know, source insulation, all those kind of things. So I think it's fantastic that that you guys are doing that. So I work for Citizens Advice Diss and Thetford, but we're working in partnership with Norfolk Citizens Advice to provide a county-wide energy advice programme. So just to kind of run through what are we talking about, a little bit about citizen advice and what we do. Mention fuel poverty, which Karen's already talked about, but go in a little bit more detail about sort of cold homes and the health implications. Talk about the current energy market, which has been very hot news recently, about the government help that's available and the help locally as well as through energy suppliers. Not such a hot topic at the moment, but what to do when energy companies go bust. Hopefully there'll be a lot less of that than there was last year. Talk about our project, Norfolk Warm and Wise, and how we provide support to people, the kind of help that we provide. Some tips on keeping on top of energy costs, which hopefully can apply to anybody. I will mention smart meters. They've been around for a while, and they're often something we're asked about. We've got a new project as well around carbon monoxide awareness, which might be of interest to people. And lastly, how to contact us. So just a quick introduction about Citizens Advice. Not everybody realises we're a charity. So we are actually independent charities and part of a national network of Citizens Advice. And we are there to provide free, impartial, confidential advice. But Citizens Advice nationally is also the consumer champion for energy. So you'll notice on most energy bills, you'll see there's a consumer helpline, and that is run by National Citizens Advice. And that helpline also is used for a lot of the trading standards. So if you wanted to get in touch with Norfolk Trading Standards, that would often be via the National Consumer Helpline. If you needed help to report, say, a scam, something like that, that would be a way of getting in touch with Norfolk Trading Standards. So as part of our work, we have a kind of twin aim. So one of the things we do, people think about us as providing advice, but also we do a lot of research and campaigning and lobbying as well. So you might have heard some people from Citizens Advice on the news recently. We have been sort of campaigning for the kind of support that we feel people will need in this cost of living crisis based on what we're finding at local offices. So all of the information that we collect when we see clients, we feed through as evidence through to National Citizens Advice, and it gives our policy fix some real evidence to basically take to committees when they're able to argue the case of what they believe would be appropriate measures or the kind of issues that people are facing. So fuel poverty increasing, as Karen said, you know, the numbers are really quite worrying, and it's about how affordable it is to heat your home. And it's really an equation that's built up of different elements. It's, you know, we think of it as being people on low income, but it's very much as well made worse by high energy costs. And as Karen said, there's a lot of very inefficient properties. So, you know, if you've got these properties that are very hard to heat, it's going to make the bills more expensive. Obviously, the energy bills are going up. And also, we've also got a lot of appliances that, you know, if people have got old appliances that are going to be energy inefficient, that might be a boiler, that might be a heating system, or it might be an old freezer. Those sort of things will all add to contribute to someone being in a position of fuel poverty and finding it difficult to afford their energy bills. And as we're hearing in the news, as the prices go up, more and more people are finding themselves in fuel poverty. The figures are still quite old and outdated, and since the pandemic, you know, we were expecting, plus the energy price rises, that these are going to have gone up significantly higher. When we look at the kind of who is in fuel poverty, we often think about what their disposable income is, and also look at, you know, is their property band of their EPC C or below. So certainly a lot of the people that we're supporting, the vast majority are in fuel poverty because they are really struggling to afford to adequately heat their homes. And as Karen said, the whole house approach is so important, because if you start looking at a poorly insulated home, you can kind of see that, yes, you might have loft insulation, but actually it's likely that you're going to be losing heat through the floor, through the walls, through windows and doors. So it's really important that people understand what the options are in terms of when they go to rent a property as well. You know, when you look at the EPC, we're amazed how many people aren't aware of their energy performance certificate and how significant it is in terms of looking at your running costs. You know, if you're taking on a property, the difference, particularly now those bills have gone up so much higher, those differences are really significant. So obviously the impacts of cold homes are quite worrying. Obviously, you know, we've had a lot in the last sort of year around people having to make really difficult choices because their household income is shrinking, the loss of universal credit uplift back in October. We've had 2 energy price rises since then. And, you know, do hear stories of people turning off their central heating, sometimes moving into one room. Sometimes it is actually still quite expensive because they might be opting to use a heater that's still quite expensive to use relative to, say, their gas central heating system. But it might be that they haven't had their boiler service for a long time, or it's not functioning properly. So yeah, some quite worrying situations people are in, and often a lot of stress and anxiety around unaffordable bills. And then you've got the knock-on effect of poorly heated homes, where you've got sometimes condensation, particularly older homes with solid walls, and that can lead to problems with damp and to the actual structure of the home. And then you can get issues with with kind of black mold. So if someone's not able to afford to adequately dry their washing, for example, they might well be drying it within the home. You add that to using the shower, cooking, all of these sources of moisture. If the house has a limited ventilation, they're trying to keep the heat in, it can lead to quite an unhealthy environment. So obviously by not heating the home adequately, it can be adding to bigger problems and leading to sort of black mold and that type of thing. So yeah, it is quite worrying. So there's been a lot of talk about the energy price cap. A lot of talk in the last few days. The price cap is likely to go up considerably again in October. And I think one of the things that often confuses people is that it's not a cap on your energy bill, much a cap on how much the energy suppliers can charge you for a unit of energy. And initially it was introduced a couple of years ago, so 2019, because there was a lot of people who had never switched suppliers or hadn't switched for a long time. And what the energy companies were doing was just making their rates higher and higher and higher. And they were not given any protection. And the same we were finding for people on prepaid meters. Often they were in a situation, if they were in debt to a supplier, they weren't always able to switch. So their bills would just continually go up and up if they stayed with that supplier. So the kind of standard variable rate would just go up and up. But sadly, what happened was that the rates, the wholesale prices obviously have gone up so much globally. Energy companies were finding that they couldn't actually keep to that price. And so a lot of them they couldn't honour those kind of prices and finding they were going out of business. They couldn't honour the prices actually that they were offering to people on really good fixed deals. So last year alone, 28 energy companies, I think at the last count, went out of business. So what we've seen is significant rises for most people in their energy bills, unless you'd fixed a deal sometime last year. It's likely that you had a 54% rise in April, and we're looking at the last estimate was from Ofgem this week, on average 2,800 a year for a household bill. But the reality is consumption could be a lot higher. So if you're in an E-rated house, you've got a large house, maybe you've got people, you know, requiring for health reasons, requiring a warmer home, spending more time at home, then the average is likely to be even higher for that property. So 2,800 sounds a lot, but actually if you've got a disability and you're actually spending a lot more time at home and you require heating, that might not be, you know, it might be considerably higher than that, unfortunately. So not long ago, I mean, Karen's outlined what was introduced today, which I would say certainly as a charity we very much welcome, because it seems to be a much more targeted approach. So the previous announcements were the £150 rebate on the council tax, the energy rebate for bands A to D. We've found, particularly with very vulnerable clients, particularly those who are struggling financially, they've not benefited yet necessarily from that, because the way that the scheme, and no criticism really on local government, because they were kind of told this is how it's going to be and it's happening tomorrow kind of thing when it was introduced. So, you know, it's been quite a difficult thing, I think, to roll out. But, you know, we've certainly heard stories of people who aren't even aware of it yet. And obviously we're trying to help people get online, because if they don't pay by direct debit, they've been advised to make an application online. And then you've got issues where people may have a debt already on their council tax. So if they don't get the application in, it may just pay off the debt on their council tax, and the energy bill may never find its way as far as the energy bill. Likewise, if they're in overdraft in their bank and the money goes into their bank, you know, it's so practical. You know, we see the sort of the practical things behind what was intended to support people with their energy isn't always as straightforward as it might seem. Certainly local government have been given discretionary funds, and I know, talking to Karen previously, that, you know, local councils do have, and obviously they have different ways that they are distributing these funds. So certainly if people weren't eligible for council tax, or for example students, there is funding that they can apply for, but some of that funding is being used for those that are most vulnerable. So the other announcement today, which is a change on the previous announcement, is the £200 loan is now going to be replaced by this non-repayable £400, which is very welcome, because I think our initial response to £200 was, oh my goodness, it's just pushing the problem, you know, further down the line for many people, and it wasn't optional. So people would be given the money, and then it was just more to pay off in the future. So as Karen mentioned, so energy companies, they do have obligation and have vulnerability strategies. So they do have an obligation towards supporting their most vulnerable consumers. And the kind of support has included the Warm Home Discount. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. There is also the Priority Service Register, which anyone pensionable age or has particular needs is recommended to join. But it's very, very important that anyone who's struggling to afford their energy do have that communication with their supplier, and they are obligated to sort of look for solutions. And we do spend a lot of time negotiating with suppliers on behalf of clients. So as I mentioned, the Warm Home Discount. So there wasn't really any mention of this specifically today, but they have been going through a bit of an overhaul. So this has been going on for years and years. I think 2011 it was first introduced, £140 that some people got automatically if they won the guaranteed element of the pension credit. And other groups that were low income or fit particular criteria would have to apply. And it was always a bit of a lottery. So certain energy companies had a high proportion of consumers who would be eligible, but they only had a very limited pot of money. So for some of these companies, they would open their annual application process in August, and a week later they'd close it because they'd reached their capacity. Whereas other companies that had fewer energy consumers who would be eligible would keep their schemes open for longer. So it was always a bit of a struggle, certainly trying to support consumers to negotiate and navigate this system, and very much an online system as well, which obviously adds extra challenges to many people. At the moment, these schemes are closed for the year. They are talking about rehauling it and making it £150 and making it more of an automatic process. But they have also talked about changing the criteria. So it's likely there'll be more households benefit, but there are likely to be some households who may have been eligible in the past who may not fit the new criteria. So it's still kind of wait and see. There's the fuel payments to pensionable households, which, as we've heard today, they're looking at doing an additional, as far as I understand, an additional payment on top of that. I mentioned the Priority Services Register. This is something that's definitely worth anyone with additional needs applying to, because it just gives your energy company a bit more information about what support you might need. That might be needing the bills in a different format. I never forget a poor lady who was visually impaired who came into our office and just said, I'm fed up with them calling me, telling me to read the meter. And she said, it's outside my apartment. I got my flat. I can't read the meter. But at least by getting her on the Priority Service Register, the supplier were then aware of her circumstances and the fact that they needed to be sending more regular meter readers out to support her. So it is important that, you know, people do sign up for that. Karen talked about the energy supply grants. Now, British Gas, their trust fund is open to non-British Gas customers. We've had some success with some of these. I think there's things we've learned along the way, is that if a customer has literally stopped and is not paying and has basically withdrawn from the process of paying for their energy supply, that stands against them when they're trying to apply for an energy trust. They need to be showing that they are making contributions. So that's something we've learned from the process. You know, we have had to support people. Often it's online and they need bills and that kind of thing to support, but we have had some success. So again, they have limited funds, and again, it depends which energy company someone's with, whether they're successful or not. and they generally won't pay for historic debts from the past. So it's very much looking at what someone's current circumstances are as part of that. As Karen mentioned, the Norfolk Assistance Scheme, we've helped a lot of clients to access this. Again, I think the challenge sometimes is it's not instant. You know, you phone up today, you won't get the money today. And unfortunately, you know, for some people that's kind of how the situation they're often in. As Karen mentioned, we have been working, we had some various funds and we've been supporting people with emergency prepayment meter vouchers and accepting referrals from organisations throughout Norfolk and Suffolk to provide people with emergency fuel vouchers. It's something we haven't been able to publicise, so it's very much relied on the networks that Karen talked about, you know, local organisations working together to identify people who are vulnerable, who fit some criteria. We haven't required people to send bank statements. It's more a point of someone understanding that they've been working with that person, supporting them, they know who they are, and so on. And like Karen said, there are local charitable grants and funds available for people who, when maybe things don't fit, maybe they don't have a prepaid meter, maybe they need some help. They've maybe had support from Norfolk Assistance Grant recently, and then suddenly their washing machine's broken, but they've, you know, so there might be other schemes or support out there that we might access. Food costs is another one. So again, if someone's on a credit meter and we haven't been able to help them with a prepaid voucher, then we might look at, you know, we've accessed money through, as many charities have, through the household support funds, where we've been able to provide supermarket vouchers. And that's really been able to contribute to someone's household funds, which hopefully will offset their energy. And I noticed Norfolk County Council recently announced that those people who have, or the households with children with eligible for free school meals are also now eligible for, I believe it's a monthly food voucher. So I guess as part of our work, it's looking at what those opportunities are for people who are eligible and making sure they're getting as much help as they can from whatever source fits. Just quickly, it's not so much an issue at the moment. Hopefully the energy companies that have gone bust, hopefully won't be too much more change, because it has been quite challenging, to say the least, trying to support people whose energy companies have gone bust. The main advice I would always give would be to try and take meter readings, regardless of who your energy company is with. Having copies of online bills is also very handy, because when your energy company goes bust, it can be very difficult to access prior bills. So clients have found that really quite challenging. The good news is that Ofgem do appoint new suppliers. People don't actually get disconnected from their energy supply. The credit is protected for households, but it's not an instant process to get your money back. And we have had all sorts of weird and wonderful bills that we've seen, and we've supported clients who've had some ridiculous bills. I remember one was for like £3,000, and it was for an energy company that had gone bust. It'd been passed on to the new company, and it was literally for 2 months summer use in a 2-bedroom gas-fired central heating house in the summer. Just looking at it and going, where did this come from? So it is very much about trying to provide that evidence, and if if people have got information about meter readings, it makes life a lot easier. So a little bit about what we do, very much about trying to help people saving money, but also trying to move them forward in terms of their position. Obviously, a lot of what we're trying to do at the moment is emergency support. So we've got the Norfolk Warmwise Energy Team. We're county-wide. We're part of, we work with Norfolk Assistance Advice. We've got a team of energy advisors, and we're offering appointments. Predominantly, we are helping people via phone, but we are prioritising our face-to-face services at any of our outreach locations or offices in Norfolk, really focusing on those people that need face-to-face most. So that includes people with English as a second language, although we do use Language Line often to support people, but it just makes it often easier to bring in paper bills as well sometimes to help people. And also if people are digitally excluded, obviously email and telephone isn't always the easiest. So yeah, so we're prioritizing the face-to-face for those clients. And we're also trying to do a lot more in terms of getting out and about, attending events and talking to groups. So today I was talking to a group of frontline workers in Thetford, which was really productive, and planning to do a lot more of that, because we realised, you know, we can do so much, but actually we can do so much more by working with all these different organisations and enabling them to do more. So the kind of casework that we do, people often come to us with one issue, which is I can't pay my bill, or I've got this massive bill. That's often the starting point, but we do very much look at, you know, meter readings, look if they've got any debts, look at the tariffs they're on, and really looking at the bigger picture. So what property are they in? Is this usual for someone to have such an enormous bill for relative to their energy performance certificate? We often help people contact their energy suppliers. So we would take, often have a form of authority. We'd often do three-way calling with the energy suppliers, or yeah, get the permission for someone so that we could do that contact on their behalf. We're quite fortunate at Systems Advice that we do have some dedicated numbers that our advisors can call to contact the energy companies. So if anyone's tried it recently, calling the energy company personally, I think I spent 2 or 3 hours on chat the other day, and I just kept turning my head away from it, thinking, is someone going to answer in a minute? It's very frustrating. So we are quite fortunate that we do have, although sometimes it can still take a long time, but anyway, we do have some contacts, which is very useful. And as Karen said, the kind of work that their support offering is, you know, looking at income maximisation, benefit checks, seeing whether people could be eligible for extra support, whether it's fuel vouchers, whether it's referrals to other services. So if it's a complex housing issue, it might be shelter they need to talk to offer it. If it was a legal issue, Norfolk Community Law Service we might refer to. If it's someone who's socially isolated, we might refer to AGK or someone who could offer that kind of help. And obviously if it's, and for things like home visits, we're not able to offer that, but we know that Karen's team are, so we might refer someone. And again, if someone we know could benefit and fits the kind of criteria for energy efficiency measures or improvements, then we would suggest or make a referral through to the Norfolk Warm Homes team. Just a quick case study. So an example of a client came to see us, actually phoned initially, but then had a face-to-face appointment, living in a small property. He'd been there for probably about 6 months, a year, suddenly had a £600 energy bill. And he was paying by direct debit, and his monthly payments were what you'd expect for somebody living in a property, a 2-bedroom property. But suddenly he had the £600 bill. He had a smart meter, which is very frustrating because essentially the readings had been going through to the energy company, but often with these energy companies, they don't calibrate the bills or update direct debits as often as sometimes need to be done. So his bill hadn't been adjusted. So it meant that the amount he was paying didn't really reflect what he was using. And because he was relatively new to the property, he hadn't understood how the heating, particularly the water heating, worked. So he's been, I think he'd pretty much had the immersion heater on full time, and hadn't realised. So basically he'd run up quite a big bill, and we were able to help him. And he was finding it really, really difficult. He was very, very stressed. He didn't know what to do. He did come in for a face-to-face appointment actually, and we helped him with the Energy Trust grant to pay off his debt. Because initially the response of the energy company, and strangely, he had several conversations. They had opportunity to flag up to him that he was in this situation, but they hadn't, and that was quite frustrating. So actually that kind of helped the case for his Energy Trust grant. It wasn't, he hadn't purposely avoided paying, he had been paying. So they were able to pay off the debt. But initially what they'd basically said was, okay, this is your usage and we'd like you to pay off this over 6 months. And he just was like, well, I just can't afford that. I don't have that money. We were able to also provide in the short term a supermarket voucher to help him with his household bills, and he hadn't applied for the warm home discount, so we were able to help with that as well. But I think more importantly was looking at actually his ongoing costs, because we were able to reduce his general energy bill costs, which, gosh, with the price rises would have now been absolutely crazy. So kind of making sure that he was setting his heating correctly. The other thing that he didn't have was an in-house display for his energy monitor. So we were able to purchase one, because it turns out the energy companies, they provide one. And after that, if you don't have one and you've rented a property, and generally there's a policy that they don't automatically have to provide a new one. So we were able to fund just this in-house display, which meant he had a bit more control about the real-time use of what he was using. So that really helped, and he was incredibly grateful. I think it's quite a good example of really how we are trying to not just help people in that emergency situation, but make sure that they feel more confident and better equipped to cope, with the situation, understanding how the heating works and so on. So just briefly, in terms of, for anyone really, keeping on top of your energy costs, meter readings, we have so many issues with estimated bills, and it causes people a lot of anxiety, because they may be, like I say, regularly paying, suddenly get a massive bill, and it might be just 1 digit wrong on the bill, and they may have provided a slightly inaccurate bill meter reading. So I think that's just one thing that's really, really important, making sure people are competent, if they can, in taking the meter readings and providing those regularly, particularly with these price rises, because it's very significant, isn't it? If the price suddenly goes up 54% and your readings are completely inaccurate. We do always try and check people on the best tariff. There's a lot of properties that are off gas in Norfolk, and a lot of properties that previously had electric storage heaters were on economy 7. Maybe now they've switched to oil or other forms of central heating, but often they're still on economy 7, and sometimes that can mean that the rate they're paying during the day, so unless you're using 60% or more on a nighttime rate, then a standard rate is usually more cost effective, and people aren't usually told that by their energy companies. So we try and look at that kind of detail. There's different ways to pay. Direct debit usually brings savings, but I think at the moment there has been a lot of concern, because energy companies, people are finding they just feel out of control with direct debit. And we've helped people. Sometimes you can actually ask, can I have a monthly bill? Can I have a paper bill? So that you feel more in control. If you want to be paying regularly, direct debit does frighten a lot of people, because if they haven't got a regular income and they're not in control of it, then it can be quite worrying. And obviously exploring energy efficiency measures and kind of behavioural change, and looking at what people might be eligible for. So switching was something that we used to do a lot of, help with people looking at savings. Obviously, it's not a big issue at the moment, but Citizens Advice have got a website that does provide, when switching does become an issue again, or a reality again, we are able to compare the customer service ratings, which is quite useful when people are looking at their different options. So obviously price is a big motivator, but customer service is also quite important. I mentioned smart meters. There have been issues with installation in areas where the signal's not great, so they rely on similar to a mobile phone signal. There's also been issues with the first generation of smart meters, so when you change suppliers, they don't always remain smart. The functionality can change, or it might take a while to come back online. And in-home displays, I think with the price rise, people are actually finding if they have got an in-house display, it can be quite useful now. Energy efficiency has become more of a priority, I guess, for people looking at where they could be saving around the home. So yeah, quite useful. Carbon monoxide awareness, just briefly. So we have got a national project that we're delivering, and we're able to offer one-to-one appointments over the phone or in person, where we're just really raising awareness of carbon monoxide. And I think at the moment, with the challenges of people trying to find ways to heat their home, I can see that, you know, servicing your gas boiler or hob might be something that you suddenly can't afford, but could, you know, present a risk if you've got a very old heating system and haven't had it serviced. Then obviously, so we're just trying to raise awareness of sources of carbon monoxide in the home, and also that we can provide test kits to the most vulnerable consumers, so people can get in touch with us if they would. Just a couple of bits of information. I mean, I won't go through this in too much detail. Karen's talked about the kind of support that people can have, but really some of the things that can make things more efficient is just actually understanding how your heating system works, and particularly when people are renting. You know, if you move from a gas central heating suddenly to having storage heaters, it's a whole different kettle of fish in terms of knowing how they work, and it can make a huge difference to how much it costs. So there is obviously help available. There's just a couple of sort of tips, obviously things like not overfilling the kettle, filling the washing machine, and I think certainly the appetite for this kind of thinking about these kind of things is increasing, because whereas before we used to say, well, you know, if you turn the lights off you might save £10 in a year, suddenly it's becoming a big amount of money, or a much bigger amount of money than it was in the past. And lastly, some contact details, so people can get in touch via our email. We've got an email advice form on there, and people can tell us their issues, and we've got energy request form there as well. Also contact us through the Norfolk Advice Line, which is no 800 number, and we're also on social media as well.
Caroline, thank you very much. Again, a lot of information there, and there is a lot of support everywhere, but in part at least I think that's probably a reflection of the demand and need for that type of support, and everything we're hearing I think is that this is going to be getting worse over the coming months, and it's going to become more and more necessary. We haven't had any questions so far in the chat, although Terry did point out, and it's you touched on it briefly, I think, Caroline, but it's an issue I know for a lot of people around the county. Of course, there's no cap on the cost of oil prices, so in many ways the people who are off grid are in some ways even more captured than those who are on. I was just going to ask Karen a question. You mentioned in terms of doing your assessments for the suitability of property, do you come across many where they're just completely unsuitable, or you know, you come to look at it and you know, notwithstanding it's a cold house and expensive to run, that there's actually not very much you can do just because it's so badly built or in such a difficult position? Is that a potential issue?
Yeah, we do. We call them non-standard builds. So you know, if you're looking at any kind of timber framed building that has cladding on it anyway, you can't put external wall on top of that because of the weight will pull it off, or it just won't adhere. So we do get a lot of non-standard builds. There's also a lot of requirements under these new installation certifications about the overhang of the buildings and the roof lines as to how you can put on the external wall. We can sometimes get around that, but we have to do what's called ancillary works. But we do have budgets within the grant for ancillary works. Yeah, I can't say, it's probably a semi-detached 1970s build is the perfect home to do these. And then of course we don't have those. We've got all kinds of builds here. So we really have to take a look at the house as a kind of a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, right. Sue, you've got your hand up.
I do, thank you. Karen, hi. Kings Lynn and West Norfolk Borough Council have been very proactive on the Norfolk warm homes thing. And we have a leaflet drop going around our village about it. But I have a query in that the heat source pumps run on electricity, and we're encouraging people to have electric cars and more and more use of electricity. Will that overload a regular household's system? You know, see, if you were to heat if you were going to have your heat source pump on at the same time that you have your electric car charging, and you want to have your washing machine running and whatever else, is it going to cause you problems?
Well, that's a really interesting question. So I haven't actually come across a problem. We have talked to residents that have got plug-in cars, and they've also got an air source heat pump, and they haven't said it's a problem. I think if you've got an estate, perhaps where you've got energy supply to that estate, and they're all on air source heat pumps, and they're all got electric charge problems, then you might have a delivery issue with that. I think that is a question for the UK power network system, but I think and the national grid, and they will be looking at this. But also in the future, they're hoping to decarbonize the grids, which it isn't so much now. So in the future, it will be much more carbon efficient to run those systems.
Interesting, because I'm just thinking that, when there's a big football match on, when the World Cup is on and it's half time, suddenly the power goes down because everyone's gone for a cup of tea at that time. So, and that's just boiling a kettle. So I'm much as I love the initiative that certainly that Kings Lynn has taken and contacted us, and and like I said, we're going to do this leaflet drop and things. I also don't want to be promoting something that will then cause problems or that we don't have the answers to, without enough information, and I'm kind of stuck as to where we go with this.
Yeah. If I could, Nigel just quickly posted something in the chat which might be of interest, and then we go to Adrienne, who's got her hand up as well.
Thanks.
Nigel, do you want to add to your comment in the chat?
Yeah, I was they're saying, that or Sue was saying that heat pumps and electric charging and all this will add to the amount of electricity we need or will use. Well, a heat pump, even the old ones, you're getting an efficiency ratio of something like 4.5 to 1. So for every kilowatt of electricity that you use, you're getting 4.5 kilowatts of heat from it. So you're basically, if everyone went onto a heat pump, you'd basically be using a quarter or well more than that electricity. So and even with and I noticed this before you said about leaky houses losing the heat through walls and that. Even a heat pump there is still viable, because if they're heating it with a 1 bar heater, they're paying for 1 kilowatt of electricity. A heat pump, they'll get it at a quarter of the price. So whatever way you look at it, an air source heat pump has got to save us money.
Yeah, I think you're right in the long run. Right, Adrienne, you've had your hand up.
Yeah. So we've got a large development here in Heatherset, 1,000, 1,300 houses, and people often say to me, well, why aren't they having solar panels put on, and why aren't they doing this and that? And I wonder if either Caroline or Karen knows if there's anything happening in the long term to make new housing better, or is it actually all right? And this is just people asking silly questions. I don't know if either of you know.
I don't know off the top of my head. I don't think it's a silly question. By the way, we should be asking that. there is more lobbying on behalf of our industry, certainly, to make homes more energy efficiency and to a higher quality build. Of course, there's always pushback from the developers for that. And I think that's kind of where the argument's going. But certainly the government's, I think, 10-point agenda for greening the environment includes building houses to a greater standard. I'm sorry, Adrian, I don't know the legislation off the top of my head.
No, it wasn't quite on stuff. But I mean, John may know. He's got his hand up. Pete.
Yeah.
No, that's actually not what I had my hand up for, actually, but it is a good point. No, I was going to offer for anybody that's interested, as a user of an electric car, something you, if you folks or you hear of people that want to use them, there is a bit of a catch with the energy suppliers these days, and I fell foul of this, in as much as their marketing says they can offer you a really cheap deal overnight if you charge between midnight and 4 o'clock in the morning. I was quoted 4p a kilowatt hour against my normal utilization of 20p a kilowatt hour. So it's still cheaper than if you go out to a public charging point, which is about twice as much. But the reality is that when I contacted, in my case, E.ON, and they said, well, we're not marketing anymore and it doesn't work for your type of car. So there was quite a lot of trying to get out of it in terms of agreeing the price. I then spoke to other suppliers thinking, well, I can change. And they said, well, you shouldn't change it. You better stick with what you've got. But I found myself in a system which is costing me 5 times more than I was expecting to pay to charge my little car. And it's just, people should be wary of what they can actually supply as opposed to what their marketing says they can supply.
I think one of the things that's probably happened at the moment is because the wholesale cost of energy has gone up so high, or there's the potential to sell energy at quite high unit cost rates, that actually the suppliers are reluctant to give that up. I know it's a simple analogy, but if they've got a kilowatt hour that they can sell to somebody for 20 pence, yeah, they don't want to sell it to you for 4 or 5 pence, because obviously they'll make more profit. And I know from some of the other stuff that I've looked into in connection with loads associated with vehicle charging, that the distributors make an assumption that the average draw per household in an area is going to be approximately, on average, 2 kilowatt hours. Mm-hmm. So 2 kilowatts at any one time spread out across. Now, of course, if you've got a vehicle charger that's even drawing a modest load like 8 kilowatts, which is a fairly standard installation for a charger, that's 4 times. So you're immediately, when that's on, taking 4 households equivalent of the average charge. So at the moment, I don't think it's an issue, and I've certainly looked at the maps for around Norfolk, and nowhere are they saying that there are really acute problems with the load to individual households. But as uptake of electric vehicles increases, and indeed potentially, I suppose, if more people were to put in heat pumps, whether they're air source or ground source heat pumps that require electricity to actually run the pumps in the first place, there is going to be more draw. And certainly the electricians I've spoken to say that the distributed network operators, so effectively the grid, really need to crack on to upgrade the power levels in the local area networks, and it's not something they're particularly addressing at the moment. So it's not a problem at the moment, but it could potentially become a problem in the not too distant future. Yeah, John, you want to come in again? Yeah,
it's on the heat pump issue actually, and maybe the question more to Karen. When I looked at this 2 or 3 years ago, I actually was working in the renewables industry, so I was very keen to basically show that I had the right kind of green footprint. But I was very concerned about the quality of the manufacture and the performance of air source heat pumps generally. I know that, I think they were saying that Mitsubishi made the best piece of equipment, and even there, the failure rate was quite high. So do you happen to know, is the reliability a lot better? Because I take your earlier point about it's got to be the right house to go to that level of expense to do it. I fully get that. You know, my next door neighbour, bless him, is putting a ground source system into a 16th century thatched cottage and doesn't understand why it's not working very well. But I'm keen on air source. I'm keen to promote air source to anybody that can stand up straight. But I am worried that the performance of these things, and of course, the last thing you want is to having gone to a £10,000 capex to find the thing falls over. And it is a worry, because I think that, you know, we all want to go that way, but I'm not super convinced that the reliability of the machines is there just yet. Do you have a view?
Yeah, I think they're better. There's more competition. We have been using Mitsubishi units. Now we're using Valence. We've got more of an issue in terms of getting the parts for these units now.
Yeah.
There's a huge pressure on the supply chain.
Yeah.
I think the organisations, we've worked with social houses that have really put a lot in. We've put in over 300 units into 2 social housing providers, and they are saying they're much better now than they were doing 5 years ago.
Okay.
So I think it has improved. I think one of our challenges, coming on to your other point, is we get a lot of calls from people that say they just want the air source heat pump without, as you said, really understanding how they work.
Yeah,
It
sure.
is a different system, and it's trying to get that across to the resident, that it's not just like having a green boiler.
Yeah.
No, it is a different method of use it. So the education around it is really important.
Yeah. No, go on. I'll take that. I get that.
Mm.
Okay, thanks for that. Nigel, you've got a question or an observation.
Yeah, as some of you know, I've spent the last 20 years installing heat pumps before I retired, which is quite handy for people here tonight. The biggest problem we've had in the industry with heat pumps, and we've had it locally, I think Bluefield area had some eco houses went in, and they put all these fancy heat pumps in. And part of the heat pump system, they have an electric backup heater. So if it doesn't get to a certain temperature in a certain time, you'll get a backup element come in and, you know, just give it a little bit of a help. Now, on some of the units that people were putting in, they were drawing something like 90 to 100 amps when this element came in. It was phenomenal. Their electric bills were just crazy. And I believe that the ones that they had, Bluefield area, they ripped them all out. Mitsubishi were renowned as being quite good. The market leader, or the best one, is Daikin. Reliability, I've had one 15 years, and I've got to find some wood. Never caused me a problem. You've got to be careful with them. There's a lot of people out there fitting them that haven't got a clue what they're doing. And you've got 2 types of heat pump. You've got a low temperature heat pump, which runs at about 45 degrees maximum. And you've got a high temperature one, which I believe now they get up to about 70 degrees. You can retrofit them. You can just rip a boiler out and put one of these in, and that'll do exactly the same job. But it's probably better to fit from new. But if any of you got a question on a heat pump, ask me and I'll tell you if I know it.
There's an offer. All right, has anybody else got any questions or observations? Okay, well, if nobody's got, sorry, Sue, yep, you've got your hand up again, Sue.
Sorry, one last one
Yep.
for Caroline. So the Norfolk Warms Homes have done a leaflet that we have got for our leaflet drop, and also so does Community Action Norfolk. Does your organisation have something that's either leaflets or posters that we can have for our village? I'm just trying to think how we take this forward. We're on our parish councils all concerned about what's going to happen for people, but how do we, gone funny, how do we then give this information to our residents?
Yeah, we've certainly got, we can provide posters, information. The carbon monoxide, for example, we've put together a little poster that people can get in touch with us if they're interested in that, and we can do the same regarding our energy advice. If there are groups of people interested in talks, we can come out and talk to interested people. And again, like frontline workers, I'm kind of working my way around the county, starting in Thetford, one in Diss next week, and just trying to work, inviting, you know, social housing, all different, you know, local councils, different people together, just to, you know, talk about the issues and the kind of ways that we can all help people and also help ourselves in terms of our own, you know, so we put less pressure on our energy suppliers. But yeah, so very happy to provide some information that you can share. That would be fantastic.
Great. Pete, would you be able to organise that to make them available?
Yeah, we can certainly look into doing that. Yeah, and I'll certainly try to make stuff available via the website. I've just said in response to a question that the presentations will be up on our website. I can't promise to do it tomorrow, but I'll certainly have it done by the end of work on Monday. I should think. Right, if nobody else has got any questions, there's just one final thing I wanted to mention to people. I was having some discussions earlier in the week with some senior officers over at Norfolk, and they asked me to let you know that I think as part of the packages that they anticipated and have been announced by Rishi Sunak and the Treasury, there is going to be extra support over and above what's already available via the Household Support Fund. And through the Norfolk Assistance Scheme. The plan is that they are going to provide me with details of that, of what extra is available and how that can be accessed. And I will be sending that out via a newsletter as soon as that arrives here today. So that may well be what I'm doing tomorrow. And again, that information we will make available on the website, so it will be up for people to look at. So basically what I'm saying is there's some more funding into the packages that Karen and Caroline have already told us about this evening. So it's only really left to me to say thank you very much. Hopefully this has given you some useful information where if you do have anybody coming to you who needs some help, either in reducing their energy costs or their energy usage, or has found themselves with problems associated with paying the bills, you've got some idea now about places you can direct people to get some assistance. So thank you once again. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your evening, and I look forward to seeing you at our next webinar, which I think the next one planned is about electric vehicle charging points. So John, that might be of particular interest to you. Hopefully see you then. Anyway, good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, good night.